Hello and welcome to this update for the Bitcoin price for February. Before I start, this is not investment advice, and make sure you speak to a financial advisor before making any investment decision. I'm sure your financial advisor will be able to explain to you the importance of a Merkle root and why the block size is an important aspect of a functioning peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So I spoke in the last video about the previous cycles which Bitcoin seems to have experienced. You can go and take a look at that video for more detail on all the money that came in during these previous cycles to elicit these bubbles. But all the same, it really is remarkable that exactly every 16 quarters we got a new all-time high in the Bitcoin price. That is, of course, if you look at it at weekly time points. This here is a quarterly data plot, so that's why you get this strange thing. If you go on weekly data points, I really do find it remarkable that every 16 quarters we got this cycle high. So although it would be dangerous to bet your house on that, it certainly serves for a good kind of base case around which to strategize the future of the Bitcoin price. So I've lined up these quote unquote cycles of Bitcoin here next to each other. And what is interesting is that actually the previous one was a bit of an outlier. We had this strange double top thing versus the previous two. And I think actually we should be drawing our inspiration from the previous two than the last one. I think we should be looking for more of this in this current cycle than this. And the reason being is that in 2021, we had all of the free government money swilling around and the government's reaction to the Wuhan flu outbreak. So we perhaps got too much too soon. And then the Chinese government banned Bitcoin mining, leading to a severe crash, which it kind of then recovered from. So I'm assuming that this here is a post-government lockdown aberration here and drawing inspiration more from the previous two cycles. And although I was a bit worried that it was a bit too much too soon back in December when I did my last video, we have actually had lots of consolidation here. So currently where we are now, I'm actually fairly happy with this. Now, I should say at this point that I'm coming at this from the view of a long-term investor rather than a trader. But for my analysis of the Bitcoin price, I'm assuming you're a long-term investor, meaning you'd have bought over a year ago at, say, around 30,000. So you'd currently be at a 3x at the moment, and you could actually afford quite a lot of chop before you decided that the cycle hypothesis, which is, like I said, is the kind of reference base case here, was broken and it was time to get out. So the best way to build up some kind of alert system here when to think that this cycle game is up and it might be time to get out, for me, would be to use technical analysis. For every other asset and for stocks and commodities, I use, like most other people, a 200-day moving average is a good indicator of where we are in a bull cycle. However, for Bitcoin, that doesn't work, and what I've found is that using a 52-week or 364-day moving average applied here on a weekly timescale, that does work. And so I've extrapolated that out here, and that gives me a good number where in the future, if we break below this, I'd probably be certainly selling half, bearing in mind that it would still be at quite a great profit. And then I've kind of created this secondary line here, which would be a definitely get out of everything line, which is just my kind of rule of thumb here, given that we would have broken this very strong technical indicator of the moving average. And given that the closer we get to the fourth quarter of this year, the more likely ill is that the whole Bitcoin cycles theory is dead on arrival. But all the same, until we even break here, I'd definitely be in the chill channel, hypothetically speaking, if I'd invested down here as a long-term investor, not a trader. So that's my commentary really on the price. But I also like to look at the data, what interesting things we can find looking at various types of data. And here I've got the age of all the Bitcoin in existence. There's about 1 million were early miners, and 1.9 million of Bitcoin wallets have existed for over 3 cycles, so we can assume that they're lost. Then there's 1.6 million what I've called long-term hodlers who've been around for 2 cycles, 4.2 million that have been around for a cycle, and 11 million liquid Bitcoin, which is in addresses that have been moved since January of 22. And then against this, I've put how much of that is from ETFs, MicroStrategy, other companies, and countries, as well as how much of that is retail held on exchanges. Now, actually, MicroStrategy and some countries and companies have tiny amounts that have been held for a cycle, but it's actually not enough individually to show up on the resolution here. So that's good because it makes this a lot more visually comparable anyway, and that's why everything's in the 0 cycle. It really is interesting, first off, how much liquid BTC there is that's not stored on exchanges. This is actually a bit of a surprise to me. And it kind of shows that actually there's perhaps more Bitcoin kind of outside the system than I'd thought before I plotted this data. So that's interesting. Presents quite a big unknown really about what's going on. What is for sure is the ETFs are making quite a big amount of this kind of liquid BTC. And as I'll show in a moment, it's quite clear that ETF buying seems to have had a big effect on the price going up. And overall, I'd kind of say that perhaps what we're seeing is a shift of money from outside the system with the liquid here into the ETFs, and also from retail to the ETFs. Now, by the way, MicroStrategy, they definitely have some impact, but really when you compare the amounts here, they don't have hardly as big an impact as all the airtime they get. And as I'll show as well later, the amount held by companies and countries, it's stable, but it's not really moving up significantly. But if we start seeing moves in companies and countries that are significant, that could be big news events, particularly the countries. So it'll be interesting to track movements here over the course of the year. But I'd be really grateful if anyone could comment on what they think, on who they think owns this liquid BTC, particularly how much of it is owned by dodgy Russians or Asian entities kind of working outside the government system, and how much of that is just retail actually holding it. I'd be interested in people's thoughts on that. Now, here I've got the ETF flows against Bitcoin price, and you can see definitely a correlation there. But I wonder, is that a systematic correlation? So, there's other people buying as well. Or is it really the ETFs that are the main cause of the price going up last year? So I'm tracking the ETF flows using the block.co and also treasuries.bitbo. And actually, I get different numbers from those two. So be aware. And actually, with all the data in this, there could be some variability in a lot of the data, but I just get the best data I can. And That's what we have to work with. So here over January, I've tracked the ETF countries, companies. We see that the ETFs accumulated 15% and MicroStrategy 6% account for most of the increase in the companies, where obviously countries didn't pick up any that was enough. El Salvador, I think, did buy a few, but not enough to show up to 3 decimal places. So overall, we do see buying, and we've seen buying by ETFs since December. So I'm tracking these here for some good data to look at later down the year. Nothing actually moved the needle in January. And here we've got the Bitcoin held on exchanges, and it's interesting to see this drop from the beginning of 2024. And moving forward, it'll be interesting to see where is that going. Is it ETFs or is it even going to liquid BTC? Now, MicroStrategy, as long as we're in the bull market, you'd think they would still be raising money. And so I'm tracking that, and they did raise $1 billion in January using capital raisers. The thing is, though, back in October, and again, when you think of particularly in December, all of the fanfare there was surrounding MicroStrategy, in October, they said they planned to raise 42 billion over the next 3 years. So actually, even if these plans went ahead, that isn't actually all that much more Bitcoin they're buying compared with ETFs and other things. So bear in mind that actually MicroStrategy aren't as important as people think they are, but all the same, they are some kind of indicator. So I'll keep tracking this. So countries holdings and no movement there to 1 decimal place on anything. But when we see certain countries suddenly start increasing their amounts, that could be obviously rocket fuel for the Bitcoin price, I believe. And actually, if we look at public companies and private companies, none of them really have significant amounts individually, apart from MicroStrategy, Block One, and Tether. And so, contrary to a lot of the shilling you hear and see on Twitter, actually, companies aren't all that important, to be honest, in this price story at the moment, and we'll keep on tracking that. So to summarize on the price again, we're still in a chill out zone to me, bearing in mind that I am looking at this from the viewpoint of a long-term investor, not a trader. And I'm using this moving average that I've tailored specifically for Bitcoin, that being a 364-day one, as the first barrier where I'd start considering selling ALA 3X. Till that happens, we're still in a chill zone here. And I think looking at this overlay here helps put that in context as well. I've set up some KPI which I'm monitoring as well to kind of keep us in a reality check if this thing does start going up like a rocket ship. So first of all, where are we in the cycle? Looking good. Are the ETF flows positive? Yes, they are. Are MicroStrategy still being able to raise money to buy Bitcoin? Yes. I've got these too good to be true meters here. As a percentage of M2, the Bitcoin market cap is still reasonable, as it is in terms of a percentage of the S&P 500. As a percentage of the value of all the US ETFs, I find that currently at a believable level. And so I'll be continue to monitor these as the year goes on to kind of help keep us grounded as we read through the other data. So that completes my thoughts on the Bitcoin price for February of 2025. I hope you got something out of this. I'm doing this for fun, really. It's very interesting and enjoyable to look at the Bitcoin price. And good luck with whatever you're doing. See you at the next video. I do videos like this one just for fun as a hobby. It's for entertainment purposes only. Always consult a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decision.